Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In today's video, we're going to be discussing another exciting what-if scenario for the wizarding world. What if Dudley Dursley, Harry Potter's volatile cousin, had turned out to be a wizard too? Now, although the mere idea of this what-if scenario might have you immediately spewing profanities my way, you must admit that the chance that Dudley might have possessed some magical talent is not all that far-fetched of an idea. Why is that, you may ask? Well, to start with, it's common knowledge that plenty of witches and wizards are born into Muggle families in which no other known relatives possesses the ability to perform magic. Which, of course, brings us to my second point. This is the exact situation Lily Evans, Harry's mum, found herself in. As you likely well know, Lily's family was comprised entirely of Muggles, including her sister Petunia, Dudley's mum. And although in adulthood Petunia showed nothing but disdain for her sister's magical talents, even going so far as to call her a freak, we know from flashbacks of the girl's childhood that Petunia actually rather envied Lily's abilities and had wished to attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry herself. In fact, as a child, she even sent a letter requesting admission to Professor Dumbledore. Sadly, yet very understandably, Petunia was gently let down by Dumbledore, who could not allow admission of a Muggle to the school. Unfortunately, this only seemed to spurn her jealousy of Lily into blatant hatred and resentment. But alas, I digress. In any case, it's completely within reason to consider the possibility that Dudley Dursley, son of Vernon and Petunia Dursley, very well could have been born a wizard. Of course, we all know that this didn't happen, but what if it had? I think the most obvious question that must first be addressed is how Mr. and Mrs. Dursley would have taken the news. So intent were they on preventing Harry from receiving his letter of acceptance from Hogwarts, one must wonder if they would have done the same if their son was also bound for the magical school of witchcraft and wizardry. Would Vernon and Petunia have hidden away Dudley's letters alongside Harry's? Would they have maintained that the wizarding world was full of freaks and certainly not to be trusted? Or, by Merlin's beard, would they have been proud of their son? Perhaps, if Dudley had turned out to be a wizard, that would have changed Vernon and Petunia's entire perspective on magic. From Petunia's view, if her son had been a wizard and received his letter welcoming him to Hogwarts, the very school that had rejected her decades before, maybe she would have felt some sort of validation. However, even if they had openly accepted Dudley's letter to Hogwarts, there's a large part of me that thinks they still would have gone to the same great lengths that they did in the actual series to prevent Harry from receiving his. That is, they would have handed over Dudley's, but continued to withhold Harry's. I mean, they strike me as petty enough that even if their son was indeed magical, they would have still felt the need to put Harry down and to not acknowledge that he too was a wizard. There's also the idea that if Vernon and Petunia had chosen to hide both boys' letters to Hogwarts and had still ended up in that isolated location where they, foolishly, thought they could hide from the mail, Hagrid would have still come for Harry, as he does in the actual series. And despite not being particularly fond of Dudley, as I'm sure you remember the pig's tail he gave him for eating Harry's birthday cake, I do believe that Hagrid would have felt duty-bound to bring Dudley along with him and Harry to Hogwarts. So, regardless of how Mr. and Mrs. Dursley felt about Dudley being a wizard, I believe that one way or another, he would have gone to Hogwarts. That is, even if Vernon and Petunia had been hell-bent on preventing him from learning magic and attending the school, Dudley still would have made it there, just like Harry did. Which brings us to my speculations on what Dudley's time at Hogwarts would have been like. To start with, I find it hard to believe that Dudley and Harry would not have sat together on the Hogwarts Express. I mean, true, they didn't like each other all that much, but imagine being in a completely foreign place in which you know very little of how things work. I'm fairly confident that you'd stick pretty close to anyone you were even remotely familiar with. So, if the two boys were sitting together on the train, only to then be joined by Ron Weasley, how would that first train ride have gone? Would Harry have offered to pay for snacks for the whole lot of them with his newfound fortune, or would he have kept quiet so as not to have to share with Dudley? From what we know of Harry's personality, he likely would have offered to purchase food for all of them, wouldn't he? and so perhaps this would have been the first of many more positive interactions between the cousins. Once they'd arrived at Hogwarts, however, I don't think they would have stayed together all that long, since I'm pretty convinced that Dudley Dursley would not have been a Gryffindor. True, he does possess some characteristics of the Scarlet and Gold House, for example, acting before thinking, and later in the series, Dudley even shows some bravery when he stands up for Harry against his parents. Overall though, I think that he would have been better suited to a different house. You may be thinking that he obviously would have been sorted into Slytherin, but I'm not so convinced. I mean, of course, as a child, he's a little terror who seems to strongly resemble Draco Malfoy's lackeys, Crabbe and Goyle. Yet, I think the sorting hat is a lot more intuitive than that. It takes into account not only who a young witch or wizard is at the age of 11, but also who they have the capacity to be. With all that in mind, I must admit that I rather think Dudley would have been sorted into Hufflepuff. He's not the cleverest, which matches well with this house being reserved more for Ravenclaw, and he proves to be rather hard-working, going after things that he's interested in, such as his passion for boxing. Think too on the fact that Hufflepuffs are known to always have good snacks, with their common room being located right by the Hogwarts kitchen, and of course, our dear Dudley had a reputation for his love of food. I also think the earlier example I mentioned of Dudley standing up for Harry showcases his strength in loyalty, another quality associated with Hufflepuff. So with Dudley and Hufflepuff, I think it would have been a nice balance for the two cousins. That is, they would have been part of the same world, learning magic, but not side by side. Perhaps this would have helped foster a friendly relationship between Harry and Dudley, similar to the one we see start to emerge later in the actual series. With a much improved relationship with Harry, and Dudley possessing the ability to do magic, I wonder if this would have led to Dudley being involved in Harry's many adventures over the year, or if he would have remained a more peripheral character. In my opinion, if he and Harry were to come around to the point of being friendly to one another, he likely would have had some involvement over the years, at the very least near the end of the series when Harry goes off to hunt Horcruxes. And since something like Dumbledore's army involves students from almost every Hogwarts house, I think this is one such plotline that would have definitely altered to include Dudley if he was also a wizarding student at the school. Side note, in terms of personal interests, I'm not convinced that Dudley would have made the Hufflepuff Quidditch team, but if he did, I think he likely would have been one of the beaters. I mean, can't you just see him swinging one of those bats at the bludgers, his face filled with glee? All in all, I truly believe that if Dudley had been a wizard, it would have done great things for his personal growth and his relationship with Harry. Being away from Vernon and Petunia, forming friendships with people outside of where he grew up, would have likely helped shape him into a decent and loyal young man from an earlier age. And with that, we've come to the end of another video. What did you think? Do you agree with what I've suggested in this what-if scenario? Or do you think that Dudley's relationship with Harry would have remained strained even if he'd been a wizard? Or perhaps you think that he would have become best mates with Draco and ended up in Slytherin? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, you're a wizard, Dudley.